Hello and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series. I'm Stacey Roman and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to have Alyami, the founder of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia, join us to discuss MBS backs down, Qatar's surprising victory in the GCC. Dr. Alyami will speak for 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Dr. Alyami.
Hello, are we still on?
Yes, you're ready to go whenever.
Okay, thank you very much. My topic is as dictated by your organization to talk about the blockade of Qatar and why did it happen and why the Qataris were able to overcome all the restrictions on them, and finally the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman decided actually single-handedly to lift the blockade for many different reasons. Historically, Qatar has been considered or was considered as part of the little Gulf states, fiefdoms, when they were under British and other foreign colonialism. And after Qatar had its independence in the 1990s, the grandfather of the current Emir of Qatar.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We actually lost our visual. The light behind you became too bright.
Okay, so what am I supposed to do?
If you could close the blind.
I don't know if there is anything I should be clicking.
Oh, no, it's the light behind you is too bright.
Oh, the light. Okay, how's
Perfect.
that?
Wonderful.
How's that? Better?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, continue.
Okay, now okay, here we go. Technology and me are not exactly the best of friends. So anyway, did you hear what I said or shall I repeat?
We heard what you said.
Huh?
We heard. You can continue.
Okay. So anyway, when Qatar had received or got its independence from Great Britain in the 1990s, the grandfather of the current Emir was like the rest of the Gulf Arab states rulers. He was a dynastic chief, and he wanted to keep things the way as they were under the British colonialism, where the British was doing all the work for him, and he was just sitting there, taking money and go and hunt for rabbits and stuff. His son, the father of the current Emir, Hamad Al Thani, decided to change the course of the Qatari internal and external affairs and politics and institutions. So he, to make these stories short, they are long, but I'll make it short. He decided to overthrow his father from the crown, from the throne, and took over and established a Qatari independent policies and moved away from the other Gulf states circle, like the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Bahrainis and everybody else, and he expanded his relations with other powers and like Egypt and Turkey and Iran and everyone in between. And that didn't make the Qataris, the Emiratis and the Saudis specifically happy, because they considered that as a betrayal of the GCC family interest. That has been going on for a long time, long before blockaded him in 2017. So historically, that's the case, and that's part of why the Saudis, with the encouragement of former President Trump, or acquiescence, tried to actually invade Qatar militarily. But lucky for the Qataris, the former Secretary of State, Tillerson, and Secretary of Defense Mattis were in power, and they told the Saudis and the Emiratis hands off for two reasons. Qatar is a very big trophy. It's a big trophy financially, but also strategically. The biggest American base outside this country, or even inside this country, are located in Qatar, the Al Ubaid Air Base. And the country is a small country, and it's very wealthy, especially with natural resources, gas, especially gas fields, which is, interestingly enough, they share with Iran. That's another issue. So that didn't work. In the meantime, they had about 10 or 15 conditions after they imposed the blockade that Qatar should accept before they remove the blockade, including especially the closure of the Al Jazeera TV network, satellite TV network, which is actually the first free forum for Arabs and non-Arabs to debate issues, Islam, Arab-Israeli conflict, and everything else. And interestingly enough, it was actually the first station where Israeli politicians and historians were debating issues with their counterparts or with anybody in the Al Jazeera. So Al Jazeera was a big problem for them because it attacks them for one thing and expose their failures at their own home. But they never, of course, Al Jazeera never criticized the government of Qatar. But the reason the Qatar was the main region the Qataris were prevailed is because, as I said, it's a trophy. It's wealthy. It's a small country, a small population. And they don't give the West, especially the United States, and other headaches like the Saudis and the other ones in the Gulf, who are always either in trouble or demanding some protections. Or Qatar was just independent. Plus, Qataris are actually, all of them, these rulers survived for a reason. They are desert foxes. They know what they are doing. You know, they are not stupid people. They are very smart. So the Qataris, in the process, the Qataris had many American universities, campuses built in Qatar. In addition to the oil and to the bases and stuff, the Qataris connected themselves to the other Western important institutions, mostly universities, but others like Carnegie and other groups that the think tanks. So Prince Mohammed actually decided to remove the blockade for many reasons. One is Prince Mohammed, especially the United Arab Emirates and other Arab countries, start relations with the Israelis or normalizations with the Israelis. Prince Mohammed was left out. So he was actually scared that he will be second in line after the ruler of the United Arab Emirates specifically, who are all over the places. And they have a freer social life for their people. They are dictators like the rest of them. But interestingly enough, the ruler of the crown prince of the United Arab Emirates, that Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, was the mentor for crown prince Mohammed bin Salman. In the meantime, he was undermining his power actually, both in Yemen and everywhere else, in Libya and with Turkey and everybody. So he felt that he might be left behind. That's a major reason he actually lifted the a blockade, but they get nothing. They get none of their demands. The 13, 14, 15 demands, they absolutely nothing. So 3 years of blockade only make Qatar stronger, both domestically, regionally, and globally. And the blockaders gain nothing. It was a foreign policy a blunder, but then that's what these people do. Okay, are you there? Yes, you are.
Yes. All right.
I thought that will be a summary for, otherwise I could go forever.
Oh, wonderful. So the first question is, how exactly did the Qataris get stronger domestically, regionally, and internationally, like you just stated?
Sorry?
How did the Qataris get stronger regionally, as you just stated?
Well, regionally, as I said, regionally they have a very, very lucrative relationship with Iran, which is the most powerful country in the Gulf states and maybe in most of the Middle East. And that's one. Turkey, for example, had a base and Qatar too. And when the blockade took place, they strengthened that base. Then also, despite, for example, Egypt blockade, the Egyptians were not exactly crazy about disconnecting themselves from the Qataris for money. I mean, their problem with Qatar is limited to the Muslim Brotherhood relations with the Qataris and stuff. But that's not. It wasn't a detriment policy, the Qataris policy to the Egyptians. These are some of the things that strengthen, and also many of the Gulf state people, the people themselves, they actually like the Qataris. Again, for the Al Jazeera, their only open forum to discuss their views and to expose their regime's failures at home. But a small country, and people sort of sympathize with them. But also, you have to understand, most of the population of Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, they are from the same tribes. You know, my last name is Alyami. It's a tribe in Saudi Arabia. There are lots of Alyamis, for example, in Qatar and in Kuwait and Bahrain and everywhere else. So there are tribes. They have relatives in each other country. So that didn't really gain too much support from within the populations of the rest of the Arab states. Globally, Qatar was seen as a very lucrative place in terms of energy, but also they have the population of Qatar, the native people of the population is less than 300,000 people. So the Qataris have a lot to offer financially to and strategically for the international community. They became the biggest buyer of British, for example, businesses, investments in this country, investments in Britain, investment and definitely in Turkey, investment everywhere. And the Iranians' animosity with the Saudis, which is 15 centuries ago, nothing new here, made Qatar worthwhile for the Iranian to protect and to defend, and vice versa, the Qataris benefit from the Iranian power. So they became much stronger. Then also the Qataris internally became actually semi-independent in terms of their of what they need, their needs, consumption like milk, like meat, like everything else. Most of the Gulf states are dependent on importing most of what they consume from outside. So that helps the Qataris actually to build their own infrastructure in terms of domestic consumptions.
Thank you. And how will lifting the blockade affect the Abraham Accords? Does it have any bearing on US relations with Saudi Arabia?
No, the Saudis want it both ways. They want to be the boss, but they didn't want to give anything for it. Frankly speaking, the Gulf states and the Gulf rulers, they need the Israelis a whole lot more than the Israelis need them. The Israelis is the driver's seat at this point, so they need the Israelis know-how. They need the Israelis protection, which I hope the Israelis want to protect, will not protect these dictators. I don't think they will, at least as far as I know. So the Saudis wanted to dominate not only the Gulf GCC countries, but also they want to dominate their affairs with the international community and with the regional groups and regional countries. But then when Prince Mohammed realized that the life goes with or without him, he decided to encourage some kind of the approach to the Israelis. But the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and Qatar was among the first Arab countries to actually initiate cooperation with the Israelis. So when he saw that he might be left out, he decided to lift the embargo or the blockade, and he actually began to see that there is interest for him into seeing this Emir of Qatar freer to help Prince Mohammed bin Salman, because the Saudis are not popular any place, especially since King Salman. King Salman is still the problem, actually. I think he victimized his son. But the thing is, they became unpopular within the Gulf states. So when Prince Mohammed bin Salman almost dismantled the Gulf GCC group by sending his troops to Bahrain and by invading Yemen and all of these external adventures he embarked on, he and his father again. His father is the most conservative and reactionary king, actually, that has ascended to the Saudi throne, and close-minded and definitely anti-Jews, anti-Israelis, anti-liberals, anti-woman, anti-everything there is that make modern society grow. So Mohammed bin Salman is in a very bad shape. So he decided lifting this blockade will help him more than hurt him, regardless of the fact that he didn't get any of his demands out of the Qataris.
Thank you. So how did Qatar's influence operations in DC enable or catalyze this situation with the GCC and the blockades being lifted?
You have to understand, your audience have to understand, there is no love lost between the rulers of the GCC. They actually don't like each other. And all of the other small Gulf states don't like the Saudis specifically because of Wahhabi, because of the Sharia law that they impose, and because Saudi Arabia is the major power in the Gulf among the Gulf Arab states. So they dominated the scene for many, many years. And that domination, not only politically and economically, but also socially and religiously. So most of the Gulf states people don't like the Saudi restrictions, like women have to wear the hijab and be second citizen. Most of them are still in the Gulf states, regardless of what anybody says. So the GCC itself is fragmented from day one. There is some need among the ruling families, which is detached from the people themselves, except ruling them and exploiting them. So they don't really care for each other. And when Prince Mohammed came in again, he did he sent his troop to crush the Bahraini Arab Spring movement and Yemen and the other Gulf states, the other smaller Gulf states, start thinking more seriously that if he did this to Bahrain and to Qatar and to Yemen, and we will be especially Oman and especially Oman and Kuwait. We could be the next target of this guy's reckless behavior and reckless policies. So they were happy to see him get stuck, for example, in these other issues, and they start easing themselves out of the GCC union and reaching out to other power, including Iran and also Turkey and other people. So that is the establishment of GCC in the 1980s, 1980, after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, was actually initiated by the Saudis, and the main reason for that is to control the other Gulf state foreign policy, domestic policy, and their natural resources, and use it as a bargain with superpowers, for example, and other powers in the region.
So can you comment on Qatar's support of Hamas, a terrorist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, and Iran as the greatest supporter of terrorism against the US?
I'm not sure I buy this argument that they are supporting Al-Qaeda and they support Hamas actually, and Qatar has a huge, just like Saudi Arabia during King Faisal era in the 1970s. All of the Gulf states were threatened by the Nasser nationalism, Nasser of Egypt in the 1950s, 60s, 70s until he died. So they actually invited the Muslim Brotherhoods to come to their countries and use them as a counter part to Nasser nationalistic call for liberating all the Arab world from all these old kings and imperialism and all of that kind of thing. So after they invited the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhoods were more educated than the Gulf people. So they became teachers, they became government officials, they became business people, they become doctors and nurses, and so they had a huge role to play in these countries, and they produce children. They become Saudis and Qataris and all of these things, and they become members of the parliaments, whether it is in Qatar or Kuwait or United Arab Emirates or Morocco or any Arab country. So it was difficult for them to actually kick them out easily, but they are also afraid they may conspire with the Muslim Brotherhood after Morsi was elected president in 2013. So they want to silence them or to get rid of them, or because they are afraid. So, they have to really understand. Your audience have to understand that the Arab regimes in the Gulf, the problem with the Muslim Brotherhood has very little to do with supporting terrorism or Hamas or whatever. It has to do with the Muslim Brotherhood charter is against rule by inheritance, which means all the kings and the emirs of the Gulf states. That's one thing. Second thing, they are afraid that they might become the Sunni leaders of all the Sunni Muslim, 1.whatever billion people. So it is more than just what they are saying about supporting extremism and terrorism. Look, I mean, anybody, unless they are stupid or denying the rights. Saudi Arabia is the biggest creator of extremism and terrorism and Wahhabism in the Middle East and all over the world. These are facts that are documented. And when I hear the Westerners and others saying that we need the Saudis to fight terrorism and extremism, how are the people who really need them to stay alive? Because if it is not for terrorism or extremism, there will be no need for the Saudi kings and the other Gulf state rulers to stay in power. So they cannot get rid of them. The rulers of the Gulf will not get rid of the extremism and religious extremism and terrorism, because they use them, and they really have used them. In 2006, former Saudi ambassador Bandar, when he to Washington D.C., when he and his father, who was defense minister before he died, Prince Sultan, they had purchased the biggest armed deal from the Britain called the Alyami in the 1980s for $100 billion or something, maybe more than that. A lot more than that, actually, close to $1 trillion. So they get lots of kickbacks from the British manufacturer of military equipment. And when that was discovered, the British courts were going to investigate whether the British companies actually broke the laws of Britain. When the Saudi princes heard about this, former Saudi ambassador Prince Bandar, this is documented. Anybody can Google this. You shouldn't take my word for anything. Just Google it. He took his airplane and went and met with Tony Blair, who was the Prime Minister of British at the time, and told him, if you didn't overrule your court, we are not going to tell you when terrorists are going to attack your country. And Blair overruled his democratic system and canceled all court inquiry into that issue. And they did the same thing actually to former U.S. Attorney General Holder, when the families of the victims of 9/11 reached a point, their lawyers, to confirm that some of the Saudi ruling family were involved in financing terrorists. They said the same thing to Holder, and Holder told his lawyer and others that there is not enough evidence, so forget about this case. So they have used terrorism and extremism to blackmail their allies, to blackmail their own allies that defend them and protect them, and overrule their own democratic values in favor of the Saudi money and fear of terrorism. It's more complicated than most people actually know or want to know or admit.
Thank you so much. You spoke earlier about Qatar's building up connections with the Western universities and think tanks. There's been a lot of controversy in the American Jewish community over Qatar financing a trip from a think tank to get the think tank to praise them, their government, as moderate. Why do you think Qatar's leaders think it's worth spending all that money to get American Jews to praise them?
Look, American universities, like American politicians, are for sale. So they are for the highest bidder. And all of these people, the biggest contribution to building and financing Middle Eastern Islamic centers in the United States and Britain and everywhere are from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. So they give them lots of money and they are for sale. Look, I have worked in Washington for many, many years. I'm in the belly of the beast, so I know what's going on. I worked for Aramco before I came to this country as a young boy. So I know that part of it too. So I follow these issues very, very, very much because it involved my work. I'm a human rights activist. I'm not a politician. I'm not an interest group. I didn't lobby for governments or anybody. I'm a human rights activist and a promoter of democratic values in Saudi Arabia specifically, because that's the country I know best. So American universities, they are even silencing freedom of expression in American universities here to appease these absolute dictators, Arab Muslim dictators and Arab dictators, especially the oil men, the Gulf state rulers. They are silencing Americans from speaking in American campuses. I think that the Middle East Forum is doing an excellent job and keeping people informed about these issues. That's my liking for your organization, and also for Dr. Pipe, for whom I have a high respect, even though we didn't agree on everything, as I mentioned to you the other day. But he's doing the right thing in terms of exposing the same thing I expose, except he has more money than I do.
Well, along those lines, that leads me into my last question. Where can we find some more of your work?
www.cdhr.info. That's Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia, and you can have people have my email, address and our website. If anybody have any questions, or if they want to have honest discussions like this one, I will be happy to meet with them on this medium until we can move physically, or I can answer any question anybody has. And nobody should be hesitant to ask any question, good, bad, and everything in between, because my job is to explain things the best I know. And I'm not a politician, and I don't really do anything just to please people or get their money. That's not what I am doing. I'm doing something that's bigger than that.
Yes, thank you so much. On our test webinar, you said to ask the hard questions, and I hope that we accomplished that today.
Keep in touch.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Dr. Alyami.
Thank you. Thank you.
For our viewers, please be on the lookout for our weekly webinar offerings email coming out over the weekend. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. Bye. Thank you.